People cannot be the church, do church, or go to line on church.
No, it's go to church online. That's what I meant to say.
Why? Reason number 2, because neglecting to assemble together as a habit is not to be true of those redeemed by Christ. How have you liked, quote-unquote, church online? Many of you may have already been pretty accustomed to this idea of church online. With the malnourished spiritual state of the so-called Christian church before the coronavirus, I wonder how it's going to be when churches have been back open for a while. The Christian must fight against the natural tendency to minimize what church is. This is a very real battle on many fronts. This is why we must renew our minds about what church is now in this time we live in what we're facing. Now is the time for the church to reveal who she really is in our day. The church cannot assemble online. Why? Because those who profess to be Christian are not to forsake the meeting as the assembly. Hebrews 10:25. We are not to neglect meeting together as a habit. This is in the context of while the church is already gathering. And while it is already gathering, there were some who chose to not assemble together. For those that the author is writing to in the book of Hebrews, they didn't assemble together because it was mainly from their contempt for other people that they had, with these other people who were gathering together too, namely the Gentiles. But the principle that carries over is that for some unjustified reason, people did not, as a habit, assemble together with other believers as the body of Christ. The congregation of God's people together worshiping their God and being nourished by Him. A place where there is to be fellowship between true believers. So contempt for some other person or a group of people is unjustified. Likewise, laziness, lack of motivation, other events continually getting in the way, and unjust government regulations are just some of the unjustified reasons that may happen. It basically comes down to thinking you don't really need to partake in the ordinances and means of grace that God has instituted for within the physical gathering of His people. That what church is to God is not what church is to you. This is really what's happening, and you act on it. You don't assemble it together. You may not think it's important. Really, truly important. You may not think you need to commit to it and be involved in it. These are some motivations, some reasons. There are obviously times, though, where meeting together is not possible. Serious illness or physical inability or natural disaster or some of the other examples, and there's others that I didn't mention in the introduction, but those are some examples. Even at the beginning of this coronavirus, it could have been justified to not meet given the real unknown danger of this virus. And that still may be for a little while. This Hebrews 10:25 is not to be a condemnation for now, but a warning for what can happen. That's what the writer of Hebrews meant it as, a warning. A warning so people would not continue to do it, but come back into the fellowship in understanding what it truly meant and desire to be involved in it. But the key principle of this is the ongoing neglect of meeting together as a habit, which can be applied to many things. Will the neglect of meeting together as a habit be forming and growing because of this virus? What will happen? This principle goes against what church means, what the church is. Remember, ecclesia, the called out ones, those called out from the world to God and assembling together as a congregation. Quite literally, remember, it is a gathering of citizens called out of their homes into some public place. This is where God's people are to worship their triune God and be fed by him as they are gathered together. This is the concern I'm raising, where in our world, regularly attending the assembling of God's people, i.e. going to church, is minimized and misunderstood, let alone just the understanding of what being the church is. That is largely distorted and misunderstood in our day. Let us not turn this great tool of technology that is very helpful at this time, let us not turn this into an unjustified habit for the neglect of meeting together. There are many variables to this current issue that don't make the decision of churches easy at all. But how will this continue? And is there a pattern forming for individuals and maybe for churches, some churches as a whole? Until next time, these are thoughts for you to reflect on, that I pray drive you to God and his word for more study, reflection, and action as we expound the word of Christ for the glory of Christ under the lordship of Christ while exposing the contrary, so that the body of Christ is equipped for life in this fallen world.